You're listening to Workplace Perspective, an employment law podcast presented by SAFFIRE Legal. Workplace Perspective is a regular podcast series for employers and employees focusing on education, training, and the law to help organizations of all sizes develop and maintain successful workplace relationships. The opinions expressed by guests on Workplace Perspective do not necessarily reflect those of SAFFIRE Legal or its attorneys and should not be considered legal advice. And now, here's your host, founder and principal attorney at SAFFIRE Legal, Teresa McQueen.
Thank you, James, and welcome everyone to Workplace Perspective, where we are striving to raise the bar at workplaces everywhere. Today, we are talking with Katie Womersley, Vice President of Engineering at the social media management company, Buffer. Katie's co-authored numerous publications, including a comprehensive guide to building, managing, and adapting to working with remote teams, aptly titled Remote Work. With a 100% remote workforce across 15 countries, Katie is definitely the person to talk to about the remote work environment. I can't wait to hear her thoughts and insights. It's going to be a great show. We'll be right back.
The opinions expressed by guests on Workplace Perspective do not necessarily reflect those of SAFFIRE Legal or its attorneys and should not be considered legal advice. You're listening to Workplace Perspective, an employment law podcast presented by SAFFIRE Legal.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to our listeners and welcome to Workplace Perspective. Katie Womersley, how are you?
Hi, very well. Hi, Teresa. It's lovely to be here.
We're super happy to have you on the show. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic. It's always timely, but right now it's very timely. It's really, really topical. So before we get started, though, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do?
I'm Katie Womersley, and I'm VP of Engineering at Buffer, a completely distributed social media management software company. So we build software to help marketing teams save time with their social media campaigns. I manage a team of around 40 software engineers and 5 engineering managers, and our office is nowhere and everywhere. We're completely distributed and have been from day one. So I'm very excited to share with your listeners how we have built a really strong culture that's known for being a good place to work, listed in numerous great places to work guide like Inc. magazine's top 50 workplaces, and and completely remote from day one.
That's great. Well, we love Buffer. Helps us out a lot.
Oh, great.
So I want to start out, this show goes by so quickly, but I want to start out by sort of talking about some of the myths and some of the pitfalls of remote work, so then we can get to talking about the really good stuff and how positive it can be.
Well, one of the biggest myths I hear is when people say to me, how do I know people are really working? And I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings around remote work, that people are more likely to slack, or if they're less productive, and that's so untrue. Remote workers are more productive than in-office workers. And there's a famous study done by Nicholas Bloom, a professor at Stanford, that showed that remote workers got on average 6 days worth of work done in 5. And there are some, good organizational reasons for this. Remote workers are far less likely to be interrupted. They're more likely to have comfortable working environments. But there's also a dark side to that, where remote workers are actually likely to overwork and to burn themselves out because they're very worried that their boss, Mrs. How do I know you're working?
Right.
Is in fact not trusting them. So they tend to overcompensate as well. Yeah.
Well, I think we're all experiencing that now. I really do. I've said this on the show before, but COVID has really brought the future to us faster than we anticipated. And I think before people would go, oh, yeah, right. Now people are like, oh, yeah. I do. I feel I've had more people tell me that they feel like they are working harder because they're working at home, but it's a different dynamic. So those of us that work at home all the time kind of know that. But when you're new to it, it's sort of like hits you upside the head, and this idea that, so when do I stop? How do I stop? What do I do? How do I, how does that happen? So it's interesting statistics.
Yeah, and setting boundaries, people say it's very important to have a work routine, how to stay productive, but it's very important that you have boundaries around where is your personal life, because you can very easily go from I work from home to I live at work. So don't do the second one.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any other sort of big myths that are out there, or any huge pitfalls?
I would say a big pitfall around remote work is that people will naturally start treating each other a little bit more distantly. People can easily be seen as just resources, inputs, avatars on a screen. It's easy to lose that human connection. And I also see that on our team at Buffer, and I've heard about this, in speaking at conferences and having conversations with people, that remote work teams sometimes struggle to build trust. They'll be overly polite, formal, because you're not going to be able to restore the relationship in the break room later if you end up getting in a bit of a lively discussion. So people can actually tend to really err on the other side and be extremely agreeable, extremely polite, and that comes at the expense of having a healthy debate and exchange of ideas.
So how does that, I've noticed that a lot. So I know I have a lot of clients who are onboarding people. At this time, I know a lot of people losing their jobs, but there are some companies who are still onboarding. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of noticed myself, I've got some, I'm on some new committees and I've met some new people, and it's kind of hard to connect with people. And then there's that idea in the workplace that I don't know if you can recreate. I'd love to hear how you guys sort of handle this. The idea that, like you said, that break room sort of discussion, like how do you capture that spontaneity, or how do you capture that, I don't know what it is that we get when we're face to face?
Well, one of the things we do is we make a lot of time in our meetings to start off with a bit of casual chit chat. That's something that I'll instruct all of my managers. It's very important to start the first 5 minutes of your meeting with nothing important, just chit chat, banter. How are you? Mm-hmm. We also do traffic light check-ins. So like, I'm feeling green, I'm feeling yellow, I'm feeling red. And people can optionally say why, but they don't have to. And so these two things help to humanize the situation a little bit. And when there's a bit more of a human element, people are more likely then to connect serendipitously, over chat, ask for a quick call. There's research from Google on psychological safety from Google's rework arm that starting a meeting with that amount of chit chat is actually one of the indicators of high performing teams. Extra true in remote settings. And then another thing we do is we encourage informal random calls. So we have a little Slack integration. It's called Donut Bot. It works for Slack, and it will randomly pair people up across the organization for a 30-minute chat. Nothing serious, nothing work related. You can grab a coffee and you'll just chat to Kyle from accounting and, how
really?
are you, what's happening in your life? Yeah. So that is one way. I mean, it's not serendipitous, but it's a way that we have that cross-pollination. Yeah.
And then in that, does that include everyone in the organization? So even upper management can be paired up with someone, or?
Yeah. Upper management is very much encouraged to do this. You can opt out of this. So people tend to opt out if they're on vacation or if they're, right, just back from parental leave and they really just do not have time, like we understand. But it's something that we strongly encourage in our organization.
That's really cool. I love that idea.
It's neat. Yeah.
How do you deal with, so you've got people all over. So how do you deal just with time zones alone with that sort of spontaneity and trying to do those things, not only just the regular organized meetings, but sort of the other stuff?
Yes. Time zones are a whole other ballgame. I would say that they make a remote work team a lot more difficult if you have very far distributed time zones. What we try to do is we will try to run our meetings in several different time zones. And for things like an all hands where it's going to be 2 a.m. for someone. We've actually got a new system, which we call all hands watch parties, which we will break up into time zones. The all hands will be a series of recorded videos kind of mashed up together. And then there will be a scheduled time when that whole time zone will do all hands with a facilitator, everybody watching live, everybody chatting to each other. So we have these watch parties, and that's the way that we've, most recently gotten around time zone challenges. But it is difficult, because people are not going to want to, play Jeopardy at 3 a.m. That's not fun, Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I know Buffer doesn't do it. You're 100% remote, right?
100%, yeah.
Okay. But tell me, how do you feel about the idea, because it's so forefront now, this idea of remote working and all that, but what do you think about these hybrid ideas, or the idea where employers are saying, we don't care if you ever come back, or if you want to come back, you can come back? How do How do you feel about that? Integrating
my previous job was in a hybrid organization where I was remote and a lot of people were in the office. I think it's more difficult than either being all in the office or all remote, but it's so popular these days that I'm actually hearing organizations call themselves remote first. And often a remote first organization is a hybrid organization, so there is an office, but the offices are regarded as more social hubs. They're there for the convenience of their teammates. They are not the primary place where work is done. That primary place is happening online. And I've heard a lot of success from these remote first organizations. A big one up here in Canada that's doing this is Shopify. So they have offices, but people are able to work from home. They are going remote first now. And they actually structure it so that people who are in the same physical office are never on the same team. So you might be sitting with Allison, Bob, and Jane, but you actually don't work with them. These are people that you might grab coffee with or have lunch with, but your teammates, they, might be in Ottawa and the Yukon and wherever else. And the reason I'm hearing that this structure is working really well is it forces the information exchange to happen online where everyone has access. And the office is there to facilitate the social work environment that a lot of people do need. I mean, 100% remote work is not for everyone. If you're very, very extroverted, probably experiencing this with COVID, but you're going to go a little stir crazy. So this hybrid model is very popular and with employers and also with employees as well.
Wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned on the during the meetings, and then we'll cut to a break. But you talked about red light, green light, yellow light. So tell me a little about where that comes from. And I also want to know if you do training. Since you are 100% remote, do you do training on how to be a remote employee successfully?
The answer is, I'll tell you after the break, and yes.
All right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear the answer to that question. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
COVID-19, better known as coronavirus, has spread throughout the world. Information about children with this disease is limited, but they are known to have had mild symptoms. Many organizations are responding accordingly depending upon their area. It's best to stay home and away from others, especially when sick, and continue following healthy hand wash guidelines, covering mouth and nose and not touching your face or high-touch surfaces. Clean and disinfect high-touch surfaces regularly, and for more information, please visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's show, do this. Share us. Like us. Give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It sure means a lot to us, and it ensures that more people tune in and raise the bar at workplaces everywhere.
Welcome back, everyone. We are talking with Buffer's Vice President of Engineering, Katie Womersley, about working remotely, and she promised us an answer. So what's our answer?
Yeah, so training we do for people coming into a remote environment around meetings, check-ins. So yes, as I'm sure you're all learning, with COVID-19, it's very important how you conduct yourself in a virtual meeting. It's important that you wait for a pause and allow there to be a breath in the room before you speak. Otherwise, everyone talks over each other. We sometimes use the raise hand feature in Zoom in larger meetings so that people are aware of when to speak. And make sure that a meeting has 3 roles. You can look this up on the internet, but a meeting should have a facilitator who keeps you on time, keeps you on the agenda, should have a note taker. Ideally, this is somebody who is not going to be needing to participate a whole ton. And this note taker should rotate. And be careful about making it a woman. Women always get the short end of the stick with the secretarial work. No, choose a guy.
No stereotyping. You hear that?
No stereotyping. Yeah.
No legal advice, but no stereotyping.
And then the last one in the meeting is a kind of an interesting one. It's a gatekeeper. So somebody who is able to so somebody who is able to sort of say, okay, well, we've heard enough from you, Teresa. Thanks. Let's hear a little bit more from Katie. So somebody that can really sort of keep, and that role should rotate as well because it can be a tense role to play. So we have these meeting roles, and we do train people on how we expect, to listen, how we expect people to speak in meetings. And then the red, green, yellow traffic light check-in, where that comes from. I actually don't know exactly where, but it originated outside of the workplace. It's like a therapeutic concept, which I actually use in my personal life as well, because sometimes somebody is not yet able to say all how they feel, but you want to know, are you kind of at a meltdown stage? You're having a terrible day. Right. New puppy had you up half the night, and then, you're late for school, and then your kid managed to staple their forehead, and it's just like so bad.
Well, that's pretty specific.
My sister did this when she was young. Yeah, it was really bad. I don't know how. Just next topic. But you might just say, like, I'm red. And then, your coworkers are going to know, okay, well, don't take it personally if Katie's a bit snappy or she didn't get back to you on a thing. She's having a day, and I'm not saying here be unprofessional. It's just being more intentional with that human element that you bring to work. If you're green, okay, well, maybe that's a great day to throw something someone's way or say, like, hey, I really need help on this. Or give some feedback that you're waiting for a good time, So that explicitness can help a lot with having more kind of honest, real relationships when you're not in the same room.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking. I love that. And the idea that they don't have to explain anything. You don't want to get too personal, and you don't want to get off topic and all that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit because I know that it's my understanding that Buffer is quite a leader among companies that are facing head-on the issue of mental illness in the workplace. So I would really love to hear about how you guys are handling that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we are so invested in this topic, we talk about it a lot, is that remote work teams are more likely to experience mental health issues because because there's a lot of research on this, that people who are socially isolated, like they're literally by themselves at home, they tend to experience the psychological, like emotional state of loneliness, and lonely people are more likely to experience clinical anxiety and clinical depression. So like actual disorders where it's going to affect their everyday life, it's going to affect their work performance. So it's sort of like you're working in an asbestos mine here. I'm all for remote work. I think there's a lot of benefits. But one of the costs is that if you are by yourself all day, humans are just not evolved to be by ourselves all day. There's something primal in your brain that goes, I am going to die. And people start getting mental health illnesses. Yeah. We talk about it quite a lot. We normalize things like seeing a therapist. I see a therapist weekly. It's in my work calendar. It's just something I do, like going to the dentist or, having my regular health checkup. It's like, I'm going to do this. It's a healthy thing to do. It helps me stay healthy. We also give our managers quite a lot of training. How do you manage somebody that has anxiety, or how do you manage somebody that has depression? Now, that is tricky. And as a workplace, it's important that you train your managers because they're often on the front line in a one-to-one meeting saying, how are you, Teresa? And then what if she answers honestly? What if she's like, the manager's not equipped,
Exactly. Yeah. Nice little package I just dropped on you. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? We're like, I'm having suicidal thoughts now. What do you do?
Right.
I mean, like it's funny, but also horrific. So it's very important to train your managers. And then the last thing is make sure that you are clear with your employees about the benefits that you're offering. Are there in or out of network psychologists? Are you offering coaching or counseling? We use an app called Modern Health that people have access to, which has got a lot of mental health things. It's got access to psychologists and coaches through the app. So figure out what your employees' benefits and rights that they do have. And just one of the small things you can do is do that homework and then actually make your teammates aware so that at least they can reach out and use the resources that they have at their disposal.
I love that. I think there should be more of a dialogue for that. And I think we're going to need it more and more now that those of us that are, people who are not used to working at home are now experiencing it and probably having those questions. Because if the only time you're seeing someone is during your meetings, you are likely to say those things, because you got to say it to somebody. And if there's nobody there, I think that's awesome. Yeah. Well, in our last couple of seconds here, last few minutes, do you have any sort of tips for, keeping morale up or maybe, preventing burnout from working from home, or working remotely?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest tips here for like keeping morale up and preventing burnout is to not lose sight of kind of why you're all here. Like presumably you were excited about this job when you signed your offer like the first day. If you're a manager at a company, this is a mission you believe in. So I would say try to not lose sight of the things that are bringing you together. Organizations exist so that groups of people can achieve an aim that is bigger than any one individual by themselves. So as much as possible, if you can remember why you're all here, not sweat the details, the day-to-day, the hour by hour too much. I think that goes a long way in general towards just being happier and healthier at work.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much. I told you it went by so fast. I have so many other things I'd love to talk to you about. Maybe you'll come back and talk to us some other time. But thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing all of your insights and your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was really great.
If you want to learn more about Katie, you can connect with her on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN Kathleen. That's KATHLEEN WOMERSLEY. You can also reach her on Twitter at Katie_WOMERS. Check out Buffer's social media management capabilities at buffer.com. You can also connect with Katie on our website at sapphirelegal.com/podcast. I also want to thank our listeners, my radio angels, James and the Knave at Night, our team extraordinaire at Workplace Perspective, our engineer and producer, Paul Roberts, our associate producer, Melissa DeLacey, with music provided by the very talented Stephen Vercelloni. So thank you all for joining us on Workplace Perspective. And until next time, keep raising the bar.